And I want to introduce our three guests that we're going to be talking with during the next hour. We're going to start with Tamara McCleary, CEO of Thulium, Matthew Confer, Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Abilitie, and one of our favorite return guests, Larry Dignan, a Global Editor-in-Chief of ZDNet. So those are our three guests. So we're going to talk about digital marketing. We're going to talk about experiential and virtual learning. And we're going to talk about future of work and all the news and industry events for the next hour. So we're going to go live soon.
Yeah, we're going to live soon. But real quick, just let everybody know what city you guys are in, just so people get some context. And if you've got any weird work from home story, we'll just go by real quick, and then we'll jump straight into the show. So this is kind of the backroom chatter. So Tamara, what do you have? So
I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and those of you who know me, we live on a farm. And so on our property, we have a separate office for our Thulium offices. And so I walk to the office from the house. And funny stories, there's so many stories. It's ridiculous. I was on a podcast when a goat broke in and created some havoc. And how many people can say that a goat's in the office? So it's a little weird over here.
Well, I consider Ray a goat as in greatest of all time podcasters, but no, we haven't had a real goat.
Wow. Matthew, where are you calling from?
So I'm in beautiful Austin, Texas. We have definitely had some pets in the work from home environment. No goats yet, so I'm waiting for next week on maybe the goats will invade our remote work. But
but next week you can turn off video. People will be okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, very excited for the show. But yeah, calling in from Austin, Texas.
Awesome.
All right, well, Larry.
I'm outside Philadelphia, and I've kind of always worked from home, so it's always a little weird. But my biggest concern right now is I have a dog who's slightly ill on meds, and it kind of makes him drunk.
Oh.
He's kind of like he's just been smoking weed for 3 days. He's just kind of all over the place.
Awesome. Goats and drunk dogs. All right. Yeah. This is going to be a great show.
Well, hey, Aubrey, thanks for producing. Let us know when. Are we ready to go?
All right, good to go. All right, everyone's popping out, and we'll get started. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Yeah, Ray, this is awesome. Episode 186. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV, and we'll do our best to answer them in the next hour. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business, which I never leave home without. He's a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review and ZDNet. He's a global sought-after keynote speaker, and in my humble opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome to DisrupTV, Ray Wang.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my awesome co-host and co-founder of the show. We have a special milestone today, but Vala is the #1 follow on Twitter for CIOs, CMOs, and I think CEOs everywhere. Big on broadcast, and of course, an author himself. But it's not about us. It is really about the awesome guests that we have, and more importantly, what's going on in the world, their insights and their expertise. Who do we have to kick it off today, Vala?
Ray, it's our privilege to have Tamara McCleary, CEO of Thulium. Tamara has been featured multiple times in Forbes and many other publications as a top influencer in marketing strategy, social media, B2B and enterprise. And she's had a career path that's anything but ordinary, from a helicopter trauma nurse to cancer researcher, bringing new medical technologies to market in Silicon Valley. Tamara is now CEO of a global tech company, Thulium, which harnesses artificial intelligence, machine learning, data and analytics to drive smart social in a B2B and enterprise space. She's a technology futurist, inspirational keynote speaker, super active on social media. She serves on unique advisory boards of some of the biggest companies in the world, including Amazon, Oracle, SAP, Cisco, Dell, IBM, Verizon, and many, many more. Lots of CEOs, lots of companies rely on her expertise. Again, a must follow on Twitter at TAMARAMCCLEARY. Welcome, Tamara, to DisrupTV.
Thank you. Wow. Thanks so much for such a great introduction. I was waiting to meet the guests myself.
No, you're terrific. You're terrific.
Well, hey, we want to catch up with you because like all the background, everything you have in place. I mean, you're really talking about a future now in a new book, really talking about machines, marketing to humans, machines marketing to other machines. Let's start there and talk about the future of this marketing roadmap you've laid out. And it's a fascinating read. Let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's so wild, and you both said it. I mean, my vision is cast upon the future because that's what we need to prepare for today. And I talk a lot about machines marketing to machines and marketing to augmented humans because, well, first of all, let's just say we're already on that process. I always say, resistance is futile. We've already been assimilated because we're augmented already. But we're getting into a much more sophisticated augmentation as technology begins to evolve. And I don't know how many of you caught this yesterday, but do you see that company? It was a 3 Square Market who actually chipped their employees. So for anyone who thinks what I'm talking about is really outlandish, I'm here to tell you it's not. And in fact, we are getting there. And because of technologies like 5G, where we're decreasing latency periods, we are going to be able to do some of the things that we've conceptualized, but we haven't gotten there yet. So be prepared. And I think we're in for a really wild ride.
Yeah, no question about it. There's several books, Human Plus Machine by Paul Daugherty, who's the Chief Technology Information Officer at Accenture, or Kai-Fu Lee, who talked about AI superpowers. Obviously, Ray's book referenced this, the digital business transformation where you are co-creating value with humans and machines. But before we get into the super techie stuff, which I know is a space you live, running a company that's really redefining use of emerging technologies to be better marketeers and better engage with stakeholders. 2019 feels like decades ago. And what we've experienced, in the history of mankind, I don't know if there's ever been a moment where the entire world is working to solve one problem. So, the old playbook may have to be thrown away completely as we think about the next norm or the new norm. And you're advising some of the top marketing professionals in the world. What are they thinking about right now? Like, had they known about this pandemic, let's say middle of last year, what would they have done differently? What's top of mind for them in terms of whether it's content, events, outreach? Is it still crisis management? Are they getting to a stable point where the remote work is actually producing to the levels that's acceptable to business? What's top of mind for these marketeers right now as we're going through this?
I think what's top of mind right now is how do we reach our target markets with a message that seems appropriate given our global situation.
Right.
And it's a complete and utter pivot to take a look at what do people care about right now? How are you a signal in this kind of noise? And how do you communicate your corporate responsibility in a time of a global pandemic while also trying to do business and make sales and continue to do things? So you've got 2 issues here. You brought up like these external stakeholders. How do we get our message across? How do we continue to do business? How are we marketing and creating sales? And at the same time, you also mentioned those internal stakeholders. So how are we doing work with a remote workforce? And I think we've been covering that a lot recently about the remote workforce. And I think that we are harnessing technologies like this video conferencing type of piece that, even people are beginning to rumble and complain about now. I mean, I'm seeing all kinds of things like, how many of you are really tired of getting on video conferencing, and everybody goes wild on social media. So I think we are in the middle, right? So we're in the middle of the storm. We've got somewhat of our footing. We're just trying to figure out how we move from here. But clearly what I think, as a technology futurist, is that the investment and focus on increasing technological investment. So we're increasing more in R&D. We're looking at how AI really is not only interwoven into the very fabric of our lives, but what we've realized is we weren't ready, and we do need more AI involved to help us in the event of a global pandemic. And so we realize now more than ever our reliance on technology, and no more can we say, oh, I don't, know about, remote working. I don't know about chatbots. Everyone's like, okay, automation. Yes, we need toilet paper. Let's get these manufacturing plants automated. So I think what it's done is it's forced its hand to make us realize that, well, I guess we do need these things because human beings are vulnerable to things like viruses.
Sure.
Right. And, but, that's a great point, right? You talked about the company that's doing the chips and embedding of chips into individuals, right? And we're talking about machines marketing to other machines, right? And pretty soon we have a very interesting conversation around ethics and automation and AI. And then we jump into this. Where do you see that, and what's happening in that front? Because I feel like we have no rules. We're kind of like scratching our surface, trying to figure out how we get there.
Well, when you look at ethics and data privacy, right? So as we start looking at things such as, with these hyper speeds of connection and decreased latency, and we're going to go new and amazing places with augmented reality, virtual reality, and you look at the speeds of transmission, right? If we're directly connected into the internet, then we look at, okay, all of our data, even our minds, basically are open for business and the transfer of information. And what I'm seeing is that we are desensitizing ourselves as a global humanity. So I think one of these critical pieces in ethics is what is our definition of privacy now? Because a lot of people are saying different things about what they're willing to give away. And what I see is people scream about privacy until they're presented with a technology that offloads from them something they don't want to do, and then they're willing to give it away.
So we're still trading privacy for convenience, privacy for value, privacy for,
privacy for safety with what Google and Apple announced in terms of tracking
health.
Right. So so there has to be some mutual benefit in order for you to, maybe privacy is not dead; it's just for sale. I don't know. I know someone smart who said that a long time ago, my co-host. But this notion of a hyper-connected, knowledge sharing, insight sharing economy, where now humans and machines are participating in with the purpose of co-creating value at the speed of need, which leads to this notion of tactile internet. Which is a very it's I think the term was coined in 2014. But can you talk to us about this world of machines and sensors and humans and all of the technology needed from 5G to edge computing to AI to cloud to create this tactile internet?
Yeah, I mean, to me, when you look at us being able to have this, haptic interface, right now, say, Vala, you, me, and Ray, we're talking, but it's not this, I'm looking at a screen, you're looking at a screen. We actually have that tactile sensation, fine motor skill manipulation. And when I talk about this haptic interface, what has to happen, first of all, is we need to have, with 5G, we're going to have decreased latency periods. Because when you think about sensation, think about, so the human auditory reaction time is about 100 milliseconds, right? But when you look at the feeling, so for me to reach out and say, I could tap you on the shoulder from way over here, is the fact that the typical human visual reaction time is, we're talking 1 millisecond, right? So we don't have those speeds yet. But the reason I talk about these things in the future is they're coming because as we have 5G is actually ubiquitous, and we have reliability with our telcos to be able to deliver services, then we're going to have this ability to have the tactile internet in a way that makes things real. So for example, telemedicine, right? So healthcare is a huge piece of interest for me because there are lots of patients out there that, okay, look at right now with COVID-19, people can't get to a facility, or you don't want to put yourself in danger. So with telemedicine, You could have your healthcare provider with you, but instead of it being a flat screen, they can actually do a more thorough physical exam. And I believe when we get to this place of having the tactile internet where we can actually feel things, and it'll revolutionize education, it'll revolutionize gaming, transportation, the smart city solutions. I mean, the sky's the limits. When you talk about how new jobs will be created, I say tactile internet. But there's what we have to have first that happens is we have to have this next leap in technology. But I have to tell you, when this happens, hold on to your hats, fasten your seatbelts, because this is going to be one of the biggest revolutions that changes our culture, our life, our expectations, the way we live, more than mobile.
And I've got two futurists with me. Can you give me a sense, both of you, are we looking at 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to 10 years before you have this immersive experience with augmented, and you are doing edge computing with the time latency that you mentioned, and there's machine learning, natural language processing, computer visioning technology that's making all of this really happen in near real time? What's the time horizon?
Well, I will let Ray comment, but I'll tell you, to even answer that question starts to make me feel like I'm a magician. And I'm looking like all of a sudden I'm going to put onto my resume now that I'm a fortune teller. Because what we don't see is there's a lot of intricate pieces that have to come together to be able to make this happen. Because people expect, I mean, consumers globally expect a certain amount of reliability. And I think this is one of the key issues is we could have the technology, but can we deliver it to have a level of reliability so that it has, it's a ubiquitous adoption?
It's got to be seamless, right? I mean, if you're in fixed environments, fixed installations, right, the 5G's got to be there. The haptics have to work perfectly, right? You've also running an AR VR stream to kind of get that experience, right? We're also getting smell. Like there's ways to actually bring in smell now to get that in play. And so I think those things are converging. And what's also interesting, what also is interesting is like trying to make that work all in sync, right? We saw something very interesting. Like I was watching the Elton John, whatever special on iHeart, like on a Sunday, right? And they had people singing live streamed all together in different locations. The band was in one place, the singer was in another place. They were producing the production. I think they recorded that way, but just think about trying to get that time sync perfect, right? That's the interesting. Like there's no lag like that. I mean, off, right? So that's part of the fun. But related to that, some of the things, Tamara, that you're looking at, I mean, it's going to change this notion of augmentation, right? Kind of like ghost in machine, right? So what happens to non-augmented humans, and what happens to authenticity in that world?
This is one of the reasons why I don't even know if you gentlemen know that I'm going back to graduate school starting in August.
Oh, congrats.
Yes. So
the best teachers are lifelong students. So
oh my gosh, I'm a lifelong learner. And Vala, I'm going to be closer to you because I'll be moving to Cambridge. I start at Harvard August 25th. But what I'm most interested in, why I want to get back to this deeper study, is I'm interested in exactly what you just said, Ray, and that is ethics and policy shaping around nascent technologies such as AI, machine learning, genetic engineering. There's a lot of questions around, are we editing out all of our diversity? And then as we become more and more augmented, and we do have humans that are directly connected into a super intelligence, then what does it mean to be human? And Ray, to your point, not everyone will be able to afford augmentation. And so then we will have an augmented race and an unaugmented race. And these are the things that right now I'm really keen to study, because we all have to be involved in how we shape this future. Because I'm telling you, if you leave it up to humanity, you have seen historically what happens when people differentiate themselves between I'm smarter than you. It's not a pretty picture. And so I want to make sure that what we're looking at is we are creating technology in service to humanity, but everybody, not just a select few. And for those of you out there that think, oh, well, I have a choice. No, you don't. Because as soon as one person chooses to be augmented in your particular professional field, you're forced to. How will you keep up? How will you compete? You won't be able to. And so you don't have a choice. And in fact, yesterday when that company was doing the chips, they did a poll on Twitter, guys, and they did a poll and 97% of people said, no, I would not accept to be chipped. However, that leaves, 3% who are getting chipped. And so just one person in that organization getting chipped means get chipped or you're gone. Yep. So no, we don't have a choice, and which is why I think this is such a critical conversation for everyone to have, not the select few, the people studying it. I really want to bring it to the masses and go, hey, what are we creating here? And is it something we want to wake up to tomorrow?
Yeah, no, this is a massive shift. And hey, congratulations on going back to school. Part of that lifelong learning, the 60-year-old curriculum, or is that 60-year curriculum? It works out perfectly. Yeah. So we are here with Tamara McCleary, CEO at Thulium. You can follow her on Twitter at Tamara, McCleary, and follow her on LinkedIn as well. Some awesome information, timely information, and of course, giving us a glimpse into the future. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
You were terrific. Really awesome follow on social. Always accessible, always engaged. So, as we talk about disruption, transformation, and learning, our next guest has been educating, inspiring some of the top business leaders in the world. Matthew Confer, Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Abilitie, a leadership development company based in Austin, Texas. So that background is beautiful, Austin, that provides immersive business simulation to global clients, client base that includes over 50 members of the Fortune 500. So some of the biggest companies are going to Matthew and his team to understand how they can become better leaders. In the past 3 years alone, Abilitie's leadership program has delivered over 20,000 corporate professionals in more than 30 countries. 20,000 students, that's amazing. And they're a pioneer in terms of virtual learning. So we're gonna learn about that because it's incredibly important at this point to be able to connect remotely. Matthew has spoken on topics of decision making. The TEDx conference is a fantastic 12-minute talk on decision making. His work on leadership development has been featured on numerous media and conferences as keynotes. You can follow Matthew on Twitter at MatthewConfer. Welcome, Matthew, to DisrupTV.
Well, thank you guys so much. It is great to be here.
Hey, we're really excited to have you. Yeah, this is, look, we have the world's largest shared virtual and reality experience at the same time, right? And we're in the middle of this. And it's kind of interesting to see, what's going on. And there's some major cultural changes that we've witnessed in the last 4 weeks. I'd love you to start with some of your observations, given your point of view.
Yeah, so we deliver our trainings, which are all simulation-based trainings. So think kind of SimCity, immersive, team-based competitions, but they're focused on, how do you be a good manager? Or how do you understand what the heck a balance sheet is? Or how do you actually build a business and deal with the external events that the world throws your way? The bulk of our work is in the classroom, those kind of experiences where, you're in a high potential program at work and you get to join, 20 of your colleagues on a 6-month journey. Our simulation might be a part of that. So a lot of the times it has an in-classroom experience, but about 4 years ago, we started to offer these as fully virtual experiences.
4 years ago.
About 4 years ago, yeah.
Wow.
And in 2019, it represented about 20% of our business, 25% of our business. I don't think it will surprise anybody that this year it will be a much larger part of our business. And since about mid-January, we've been starting to pivot events that were planned for the physical classroom into the virtual classroom.
That's awesome.
That's huge.
You had an awesome TED Talk where you talked about experiential learning, scenario planning. You get these super smart leaders running big companies in a room, and throughout the learning process, you actually remove certain blind spots they have in terms of decision making. And in your TED Talk, you talked about how in order to be in order to make important positive decisions, you have to have
we're seeing some things, but when you're looking at these big decisions, I think Val will come back and hopefully you can hear. It's really about what are these shifts, right? What are these shifts that are going on in the virtual simulations that are happening in the marketplace?
Yeah, so one of the simulations, we kind of throw curveballs at people. So you get very comfortable bringing these new products to market, and before you know it, you get an email in the simulation interface that there's a potential acquisition attempt on the horizon. Yeah,
or competitor launches before you, right? Or
exactly.
Like so
and so
that way.
Exactly. So your VP of R&D might be sitting next to you or in a virtual breakout room with you, and they get a different email than you get as the CEO. So it's about how does your team actually cross-functionally collaborate and decide on the best path forward, which is akin to really a lot of the challenges that we all face in the real world. So we're kind of firm believers that if airline pilots get in a simulator before they get into the real world, how can we get corporate leaders into a simulator before they get into their real world?
So we got leadership simulation going on. I mean, so basically there's a certain amount of transmedia storytelling going on back here, trying to get the scenarios right and then trying to get it customized for the actual is it customized for the actual corporate client, or is it customized, or is there generic ones that people can sign up for? Like, how does it get set up?
Yeah, so we're actually firm believers in off-the-shelf solutions. So what I mean by that is we have the pleasure of working with Dell Computers. We have the pleasure of working with the Coca-Cola Corporation. And they actually run the same simulations. And the reason is because we're focused on the core leadership principles of what does it take to be a good manager, or what does it take to understand financial acumen. We're less focused on what does it take to understand the CPG industry or the technology industry. We're firm believers that you need that base level of leadership competency before you can take it kind of up a notch and say, this is what it means to be a rising leader at Coca-Cola or somewhere else.
Yeah, I know this makes a lot of sense. And as you make that shift, now what's changed in virtual simulations over the past 5 years? Have the technologies gotten better? Have they gotten a little worse? Have certain improvements changed?
Yeah, so the biggest change has without a doubt just been the adoption. People are open to it. People do so much of their work remotely now that they're less apprehensive to say, oh my God, I don't know, like we need to get these leaders together. How are they going to stay engaged? People are just going to be, popping over to YouTube and finding the next cat video if we don't make the training immersive. And so what we've done is we've built competitive team-based events, and people are actually open to it in a way that they would not have been 3 to 4 years ago.
Wow, that makes a big shift in terms of what's going on, right? And this really changes the way people look at where leadership goes, right? And when we think about leadership in general in this marketplace, right? I mean, what companies typically come to you? Like what types of categories, what types of industries?
For the most part, our company has worked with very large multinational organizations or universities. That's been kind of the sweet spot for us. It's these large organizations that have multiple leadership programs. You get promoted into a new role and boom, you're in a leadership program with your colleagues to focus on how do we actually level you up and prepare you for your next promotion. We don't do as much work with small to mid-sized businesses, but we're actually rolling out open enrollment MBA classes and open enrollment MBA programs so that people can actually sign up and go through the same simulations that leaders at Fortune 500 companies are going through in 30 countries around the world.
Wow. This is actually very, very interesting. We had just talked about haptics and virtual worlds and what's going, and now we got virtual simulations in place. Is there ways to train people to be better managers in this model?
Well, so I'm a huge fan of our people manager simulation, and the way the game's built is you manage these 6 character archetypes. So one of the characters, thinks they're ready to be a CEO, but they just graduated from university. One of the characters is a top performer who doesn't really want to be a manager, but you want to promote her. And these characters send you emails. They deal with the challenges that you face in the real world. And so as a result, what does it take to be a good manager? The thing that we teach a lot is you have to build trust. You have to understand what motivates your people. And the big leap is this understanding that most people aren't motivated by the same things you are. And that's a huge leap for people to make. I know personally, I had to make that leap as a manager. You just assume that everybody's motivated by similar things than you are. And what you find in the game is these 6 characters are motivated by things very differently than you are.
Amazing.
Sorry, guys, I'm back.
No problem.
Talk about being disrupted. I experienced a blue screen on my laptop. I'm going to go back to my question. I apologize, I just jumped in. But in your TED Talk, you talk about challenging constraints. You talked about conducting pre-mortems as important as post-mortems, and then paying attention to details. These are the 3 components that help you make better decisions. Can you give us a kind of a 1 minute or so overview of these 3 important elements and how you discovered these important capabilities in terms of making good decisions while you're training your executives?
Yeah, so we've watched thousands of people go through these simulations, and it's the best part about our job is when we get to get on site, facilitate, or watch one of these experiences happen. And what I found was there are certain things that really great decision makers do. And so we tried to distill it down to a 3-step process. And the first one, as you indicated, was challenge the constraints. Most of the time you get a problem like thrown at you, and your first thing is you just want to dive headfirst in and solve the problem. Well, the actual right move is to take a step back and say, what sort of constraints are holding me back, are hampering me? And as a result, then dissect the problem. So challenge the constraints first. Number 2, which you indicated, was embrace a pre-mortem. And the reason is because we're so akin to saying after a project is over, let's do a post-mortem and figure out what went right, figure out what went wrong. Instead, during the planning phase or during the decision-making phase, say, if this was an unmitigated failure, why would it be an unmitigated failure? And let's actually act to address those issues. So that's the pre-mortem. And then the third is just check the basics. I have literally watched leaders of Fortune 500 companies put these elaborate plans in place, and then it's a 0 in the wrong place, or it's not communicating with the person sitting next to them that trips them up. So you get to the end of a project, make sure that you check the basics, you've got the T's crossed and the I's dotted.
Terrific advice. And you have 3 great stories that galvanize these 3 important lessons. So I highly recommend our audience to check out Matthew's TED Talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was an amazing TED Talk, right? Talking about talent development, experiential learning. Is there anything, like if I had to do like the quick summary, what would you pull out of that?
I think that in today's day and age, experiential learning is powerful for a couple of reasons. And the 2 biggest ones are we are just inundated with distractions. And so if you go to a learning and you are sitting in a classroom or logging in and all you see is just PowerPoint slides flying by, it is so easy to get distracted by the pings, the dings, the rings, the everything that is going on in your world. Distraction is all around us. So if training is not immersive and not experiential, people are just going to tune out. The second thing is we all have this innate demand for control in our lives now. And so there's a sense that why we build our trainings this way is that people want in. They want in the game. We grew up with games. We love games. We want control. We walk out of our door and we press a button and a stranger just picks us up and takes us anywhere that we want to go. We need groceries and they just show up on our doorstep. So we want a level of control in our life. And I believe, and our firm believes, people kind of want a level of control in their training as well. They want to be a part of it.
So you started 4 years ago with the virtual simulations and training. So a pioneer in terms of understanding that there needs to be a hybrid, centralized and decentralized, distributed model of virtual simulations and training. Now, in that 5-year or 4 or 5 year period, there's been quite a bit of change in terms of the technological landscape, with advancements in AI, advancements in digital advisors, certainly video conferencing advancements. We've Ray and I are on our 4th platform in 4 years.
Wow.
And so every year on average we move to a different platform. So and every time we think we're making progress in terms of taking advantage of technology to have a better experience for our audience. What's changed in the last 4 years? And if you can take us to maybe the next 4 years, how will virtual simulations improve to a point where you'll see wide scale adoption?
Yeah, I love that question. I find it fascinating. The biggest things that have changed for us is one, the just embracing of the medium. You spend enough time dialing into remote calls and you're comfortable on a webcam now. So you embrace training in the same way. And I think you kind of innately know that you want to train this way because you want to get better at these skills. From a technological perspective, we're a firm believer in kind of the cameras on, microphones on the entire time. The reason is a lot of our clients come to us with a desire to focus on networking and building those cohesive units. That really only happens if even when you're doing a virtual training, you still do a 10-minute break to go get coffee. It's just weird because you're making your coffee in your own kitchen, but you still have that virtual coffee break. You still do a networking event. You still do lunches together. You embrace that. And then I think the other thing is we're just firm believers in breakout rooms. The ability to get in and out of virtual classrooms, into small group discussions, use polling, use whiteboards, make it so participants are not going more than 3 or so minutes without interacting in some way. Type your thought into a chat. Let's do a poll. Let's do a whiteboard. We're going to send everybody into 5 random breakout rooms. We're going to keep you guessing a little bit.
Okay.
That's great, right? You're designing for serendipity, right? That's basically what you want, that casual conversation where you bump in. So I want to ask you about the Austin tech scene. What is happening there, right? I mean, we feel like
that's changed in the last 5 years for sure. Yeah.
It has. So I moved from Boston, Massachusetts, and I had fallen in love. My wife and I have fallen in love with Austin every subsequent year that we've been here. I think when we moved here and we made friends, people were always saying, gosh, Austin has changed so much in the last 5 years that we've been here. There's no way it will change more. And then every subsequent year, it is just, I've got cranes over each of my shoulders.
It looks like Manhattan back there. This is crazy. I mean,
it's incredible.
Density from hell.
Yeah.
It is a weird grouping of people from the West Coast, people from the East Coast, people from all over that are embracing the weirdness, the tech scene, the barbecue, the tacos. It's a great place to be. But please don't move here. That's the other.
I advised several folks at University of Austin, Texas. Yeah. Go ahead, Ray. You're on mute.
I was going to say, how's the funding there? I mean, so how's the funding? Are there good mentors? Are there good VCs out there? Is there good infrastructure for what you're trying to do?
Yeah, the incredible thing about our organization is you mentioned the University of Texas. They've actually been utilizing our simulations for the past 10 years as a kickoff to their McCombs MBA program. Oh, wow. So if anybody has done the McCombs MBA program over the last 10 years, you've actually participated in one of our simulations. So you can only imagine that when you have about 200 MBA students on their second day on campus competing in a business simulation, there is like some pent up aggression and competitiveness that is flowing as people try to prove that they are the most brilliant business mind. So yeah, it's great. I love UT.
Awesome. Ray and I advised when Admiral McCraven was the chancellor. We advised the CIO and CDO of UT on a large-scale blockchain project that connected students to faculty, administration, and employers. And it was, it was great innovation. Tremendous amount of big brains in Austin, no question. And everyone thinks big, so yes. It's not just the steak and the music scene. Everything is big. So my last question to you, give advice to managers, leaders, who are scared about, reluctant, and unsure about developing skills and talent in this environment that we're in, meaning highly distributed digital. What can they do to get into the right mindset, to recognize that there are incredible ways for you to connect with your stakeholders, and you can lean into technology a bit more and really accomplish hopefully as much as you could in person in office?
I think the biggest thing that you can do is embrace that you're a little bit scared and a little bit nervous too. I think we're all diving into the deep end, with no floaties on and trying to figure out how the heck we're going to manage everything remotely, manage people and manage business processes. So we do, our morning stand-up meeting where everybody's, on Zoom, can see each other talking about over that first glorious cup of coffee. And I think if you take that to your people management as well, and you embrace that this is a new paradigm for you too, and that we're going to get through this together, but the way we're going to do it is we're probably going to communicate more than we were before, because we're not just going to randomly run into each other in the office kitchen. We're going to have to be deliberate about at 2 p.m. every Thursday, we're going to do a catch up like we normally would do over, an afternoon cup of coffee, but we're going to do it at home with our cameras on.
Terrific advice. Terrific advice.
Wonderful advice. Matthew Confer, VP Strategy and Business Development at Abilitie. They've been doing this for the last 4 years, really taking the virtual training, virtual simulation world to storm. So follow him on Twitter at Matthew, Confer. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Matthew. Terrific. Yeah, 4 years ago, they started remote training, and what better time now to provide their offerings to the rest of the world. Battle tested, exactly. Battle tested.
Who's more battle tested than our next guest?
No one is more battle tested to being a guest on our show, because this is our 16th appearance with one of our favorite guests, Larry Dignan, global editor-in-chief of ZDNet and editorial director of ZDNet sister site Tech Republic. Since Larry's been here 16 times, most of you know his bio, but Larry is most recently executive editor of news and blogs for ZDNet. He's been covering technology and financial services news since 1995. And again, this is his 16th time on our show, which means he's a first ballot Hall of Fame inductee to DisrupTV. You can follow Larry on Twitter at LDIGNAN. Welcome back, Larry, to DisrupTV.
I can't believe it's been 16 times. I'll take your account for it.
I'm relying on our producer, and she's world-class producer.
She knows better than me, that's for sure. I remember past last week, so I'm kind of like, okay.
No, this is awesome. Hey, so you've been working from home from ages. I've been working from home from ages, but most of the country hasn't, right? And it's about 37% of the country can probably work from home. But we've noticed some very interesting observations. You wrote an interesting piece about that. Jump in a little bit and give our viewers, listeners, some highlight of what was going on. So,
yeah, this whole event's been strange for a bunch of reasons, but the biggest reason is I've been remote. My team's distributed in Louisville, Boston, North Carolina, AU, UK, it's all over the place, right? And then we have all of our contributors, which are also all over the place. So we've kind of always been remote. And I think what's changed in our world is that everyone else has gone remote. So it is one thing when I'm on Zoom and there's a bunch of people in the conference room. It's another thing entirely when you get all these video conferencing newbies who want to chat every 3 minutes. So I find myself going, can we just turn off the cameras and talk on the phone? That still works too. Can I go for a walk? Like, it's like right now, I think it's easing up now, but I would probably say, the weirdest thing has been for teams that were already remote and distributed, and then having everyone else come on board. So you're sort of going over growing pains that you just kind of shake your head at because you've been doing it forever. So I think the other interesting thing is that you just find you sort of know what you're doing, right? So like we were in a position to like give tips and kind of tell people what we learned, and picked up a few new tricks, like you got to do the video conferencing office hours and things like that. And then I think the biggest moving part with, what's changed with my team since, pre-COVID versus not, a lot of the remote workers always had some sort of local outlet, right? So if you worked remote, you could still go to a coffee shop and talk to a few locals. Now you're staying home, and then that creates a void to itself, right? So So that's sort of some different stuff, but it's fascinating. I mean, I'm just glad my home gym is equipped, or I'd probably be killing somebody right now. Because you cannot take those weights away from me. I am one grumpy ass if I don't lift.
Well, you don't want to wipe after, so you don't want to wipe up after or before. So. So I'm glad I have that. But where I've really been thinking about now is just kind of what the new normal is going to look like. I mean, I kind of look at, I would say half this workforce is going back to the office and the other half is probably staying remote, either at their own discretion or the company's discretion, right? Because let's face it, commercial real estate is hosed. Because you are not going to be building up these big campuses. You're probably questioning every real estate investment you have just based on, A, financials, and B, just work productivity, right? Like, I think a lot of people can work from home, maybe prefer it. So I think we're sort of going to go with this hybrid kind of arrangement. And, so I'm just looking at how that shapes out and how it's going to affect industries, right? Sure. Like education, Jesus, what? Like Harvard's charging me the same amount for an online class? Really? Like the whole tuition structure is going to be blown apart because parents are going to walk, right? They're going to protest. And, let's face it, someplace that's charging you, $80K a year in tuition. I mean, you better be there for another reason other than the course. And that reason is usually networking, meeting somebody connected, the social experience. There's all this other stuff that gets cut away when you're remote. So what's that course really worth? And what happens at tenure? I mean, you just go industry after industry. I think the other thing that I've noticed through this is that companies that were doing digital transformation are doing way better in this. And let's face it, a lot of it was just luck. But I talked to the CIO from Nebraska Medical yesterday, right? So they had this telehealth thing and they had iPads on the floor. And this was all basically patient experience. You can kind of check your record, check in for appointments, all this stuff. And, they rolled it out and they had 1% adoption, right? Doctors are like, okay, whatever. Yep. So enter COVID. Now you say, all right, so I can't really go in this room without wasting PPE. So I want to save the PPE. I want health, right? I got to watch my own safety and everybody else's safety. So telehealth is becoming, maybe a 6-foot type of thing at this point. Yeah. And, so now the engagement and the usage is like, it's basically 100%.
Amazing.
And the other weird ROI thing is, well, it's not weird. It's kind of sad. Well, it is sad. The other thing is those iPads basically, they provided a connection when, an end of life issue was happening. So, how do you measure that ROI? But this is a project that was undertaken under, some digital transformation effort. If you asked them what the ROI was 3 months ago, they'd be like, meh, whatever. It was a nice experiment. It was R&D, whatever. Now it's not going away, right? Yeah. So I think, but you go industry after industry, the ones who were like pursuing digital transformation things kind of lucked out into use cases and ROI stuff where the other ones I think were scrambling, right? Because to move a workforce completely remote, you kind of need a cloud architecture. Right. You need to virtualize stuff. You need to make things mobile. And even if you're going into a legacy system, it's got to be mobile. It's got to be connected through, but those hurdles were easier for companies that were already down that digital transformation road. So that's been fascinating to watch. And I think it's going to upend just industry after industry. Like it's, I mean, I think it's just going to be carnage out there. I mean, we're just going to see all sorts of it's going to be upheaval. So I'm just trying to figure out how that's, going to wind up being modeled. What's it look like? It's one thing to say, get back to work, but easier said than done. It's been fascinating to watch, but I think it's disruption across the board.
I wrote a ZDNet article yesterday looking at, we have a commerce solution that looks at 500 million to 1 billion data points, commerce data points every 90 days. The second half of March, we saw almost a 50% year-over-year increase on commerce. In fact, I think in March was the first month that Americans bought more online groceries than groceries in person. So certain technologies, investment in e-commerce as part of your digital transformation strategy, those who did are positioned to perhaps still connect and conduct business. Those who didn't are rushing to do so. My question, as far as I have personally have never experienced more engagement with the articles that I'm writing and activity on social. Have you seen explosive growth in terms of people now at home wanting to consume as much news and information, maybe upskilling, reskilling, and just trying to learn about landscape, learn about different scenario plans? The engagements I see on my ZDNet posts are unlike anything I've seen in the last 4 years. So is that true for your industry in general?
Yeah, I mean, traffic up, engagement up, registrations, all that stuff's up. I think there are a few moving threads here, right? So one, there's a lot of interest in upskilling, right? Yes. Because especially among people that have downtime, right? So it's an interesting problem, right? You're locked in your house. Things you normally would do, you don't want to do. So it kind of forces you to ask, what do I really want to do? And you actually have some time to think about, all right, well, maybe I should bone up on Python or data science or whatever. Right. And so you see that happening. I think the other thing is that, what we're also finding in tech and business, I think we're almost an outlet away from, the Trumpathon and all that stuff. Like, it is very hard to watch news nonstop. True. Like, I basically just had to limit it. I just go, you know what? The CDC knows what they're doing. I'm just going to look on the site and be like, is there any change? Like, when the CDC site goes, go to the gym in blinking HTML, then I know we're good. Until then, nothing really changes, right? Aside from the numbers go up. It's a very repetitious kind of thing. And it's almost like, so I think the tech space is almost a little bit of a diversion. And I see that starting to come back from the tech companies. Like, there are some very interesting smartphones rolling out. And, so for me, my lens to COVID revolves around, remote work, tech for first responders. It's about stuff that's in our wheelhouse. Like, I still would love to just talk to the people doing these models, just so I understand what assumptions are being made. You got crappy data coming in. What are you spitting out? Like, there are so many. I mean, it's like the data science story of our time, right? Yeah. If the information isn't, it's just the data is just not that great, right? You have people dying in their homes. Like, who's counted, who's not, who got tested. So there's a lot of stuff that, is COVID, but it's also in our wheelhouse too. So.
Oh, it is crazy. Hey, let's talk about video conferencing. A little news of Verizon buying Blue Jeans, a little Zoom issue on security, this 8x8 Jitsi with like 10 million monthly active users, and Teams coming in, and then Google Meet changing their brand name, like all in 1 week.
Yeah, it's the video conferencing stuff is kind of fascinating. I looked at the price for Blue Jeans and I was kind of like, because I think they went public, right? They went private. I mean, they kind of switched hands and whatever. So for Verizon, it's probably a good buy for business because they can put it on their own network and maybe it's more secure or whatever. And it's a good system. I mean, and Teams is working out because, a lot of those enterprise licenses were already in enterprises to begin with. And Teams was getting momentum, and I've actually talked to a bunch of Teams users and they seem to like it. So the one I'm watching and Google Meets, Meets, Hangouts, whatever they call the damn thing. Every time
and then one more Ring Central Video. There you go. We got all these at once. So.
Make the mistake of saying Google, so now my phone's doing stuff.
Google Assistant.
So the thing, Meets, it's kind of clunky. I mean, every time I use it, the devs, the engineers, the product people like it, and I'm just like, really? So I still think the most fascinating story here to me in video conferencing is Zoom.
Yeah.
Right? They've kind of had their Microsoft moment. I mean, for all things aside about the security screw ups, I think they've kind of, they've been transparent. They set up their, people and task force and focusing on it. So, and ease of use, I still think it's easy, right?
Yeah.
It just kind of works. That's
Yeah.
I do think there's plenty of room for other entrants in this. And I think we'll probably see it over time. So it's a fascinating space, but I think it's just kind of a land grab. And I think the thing to watch is like how many people go back to a old normal versus a new normal. Like how do these tools develop over time, right? Like I will love to see what the usage looks like of these things, when we get to some new normal.
Right.
I get the feeling that I don't think video conferencing is really going away. I think it's just become sort of a norm at this point. So I think that's going to be interesting as people get back to work, just looking at the usage. And it's a fascinating space, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some new entrant or some entrepreneur looking at this and going, I could do this better.
Hey, the WebRTC codecs are everywhere, right?
Go for it.
You, in addition to, technologies like video conferencing and working from home, you recently featured a PwC study where I think almost more than 8 out of 10 CFOs are planning on cost cutting, and 7 out of 10 or 67% said they may, delay investments. 53 thought that there'd be cuts in IT investments. Do you have a broad sense when we talk about new norm, as we go, let's say calendar 2020, what we can expect in terms of, one, the CFO is going to sign off on any major investment. So in any buying decision team, the most influential person right now is not the CIO or CMO or even the CEO, it's the CFO. And what type of advice you have or insights to business leaders?
Well, one, it's extremely fluid, right? So, the next round of earnings we have coming up next 2 weeks is going to be fascinating, right? So right now we have a situation where, companies have shut down. They've worked, people have gone remote. They're still paying people. They're still paying benefits. People are cutting, whatever. A lot of companies have already tapped their credit lines. Mm-hmm. So you look at it and you go, okay, what happens after that? Like if this prolongs, right?
So it's crazy if we wait too long. I mean, I'm worried. I mean, are you worried?
Yeah, I think there's that, but I also think there's a case of you come back and what does demand look like, right? So let's just say the last 2 years, right? The IT budget's really been driven by marketing, customer experience, growing revenue. That's been kind of the mantra from everybody. What happens when those customers don't feel like buying for whatever reason, right? So you could have the best customer experience digitally as a restaurant, but your takeout is never going to make up for what packing in 400 people in a restaurant would be.
Right.
And then if it goes down to half capacity, what's that look like? Right. So I think the IT projects are going to get reordered, and I'm just not sure how they're going to get reordered yet. Like, some of these IT projects will be designed to cut costs. But I think there's been a good bit of that too, right? So I think it's going to be a lot of nip and tucking. And I do think IT projects are going to be tethered to things like saving on real estate, enabling people to work remote. How do I just be more efficient, right? Yeah. So you may see things like edge computing and IoT get money. Certainly anybody who's, trying to figure out cloud at this point, they're probably going to figure it out a lot faster. I do think IT budgets and SaaS budgets and all that kind of stuff, I think, you're going to go back to your vendor and be like, wait, why am I paying this much? Right? What are the outcomes here? So I think things are going to be obviously scrutinized a lot more, but I think we're going to see things, we're going to see the IT pendulum switch away from the customer experience, grow revenue thing to more like, okay, you better save money on this too. Now, ideally, it boosts the experience and saves money, or it gives me more data to play with. But, I think a lot of IT projects are going to be geared towards that. And it'll probably be a few hops removed. So, if you're enabling remote work, okay, there's the soft benefits of that. But the other benefit is I'm selling this office to someone. I don't know who, but whatever. Details. You will start to think through like, all right, so how do I save on my capital costs? So I think you're going to see the IT connected to the very hard costs of rents, commercial real estate, infrastructure. So I think that's where the savings are going to be. Automation projects maybe, which, may get rid of people, may not, may enable people to do more. So I think the whole lens of IT, I don't know how it's going to play out per se, but the lens in which IT is viewed is going to change away from that experience revenue growth thing to something else.
Yeah. Automation, efficiency, hopefully not at the expense of degrading the experience, but just getting more with, I hate to say this, getting more. I worked for private equity owned companies for a decade plus. So doing more with less, I cringe when I hear that.
I know, I'm cringe too. That's the whole PE mantra.
It's true. They never, invest ahead of need. But at the same time, I've learned that, constraint breeds creativity. So, we'll come up with ways to make best use of technology.
Some great comments popping in here on Twitter and on Periscope. And we got to wrap this up. We are here with Larry Dignan, editor-in-chief at ZDNet. Follow him at LDIGNAN. And of course, catch all his work on ZDNet as well. So thanks a lot for being on the show, Larry.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Obviously, it's been 6 times or 16 times.
We got to get to that 20 number.
We forgot to highlight our 400th guest, Vala. So,
I know.
Matthew. I just want to say hi.
Yes.
So if we had a little cheer thing, we do that. But hey, thanks for being our 400th guest. This is it for DisrupTV show. We are literally at the top of the hour. And more importantly, it's been a very interesting show. So who do we've got next week here?
Yeah, episode 187. The next milestone we're going after is 500 unique guests. We have Seth Raven, CEO of Rimini Streets. We have Karen Su, Chief Executive Officer of Blockchain Intel. And we have Joe McKendrick, author, reporter, regular Forbes contributor, and all around great guy to follow on social. So 3 big brains next week. If it's Friday, it's Disrupt. We really thank you for watching the show. Ray, closing remarks.
Hey, I think it's very, very exciting. Definitely stay tuned. We got lots of stuff going. We're broadcasting coast to coast. And of course, we're testing out new platforms all the time. If you are a CEO, if you are a startup, if you're doing something very unique as a CIO, we want you here. CXOs, CDOs, CMOs, people in HR. If you're doing something transformational in business, come catch us on the show. We're starting bookings for June, July, and August, and would love to have you out here. Vala, what's on your mind?
I'm just grateful. We were talking to Larry before the show. I've published 26 articles since March to present day, and I can tell you there's so much interest in understanding, technology, leadership, business, market trends, and the amount of engagement is off the charts. So my advice to you, business leaders: contribute, write, participate in podcasts. Have virtual coffee meetings, share your learnings, and try to, and know that anytime you teach, you learn. So I will plan to continue to write as much as I can. And, it's not just because Larry was on the show, but ZDNet happens to be one of the most influential platforms in the world. So every time I write, my network is growing, and I'm learning and making new connections. So do yourself a favor and learn and teach during this time. Leaders emerge during a crisis, and those who can educate us and bring some sanity, calmness, and also foresight in terms of what we need to do to do to be successful in the future, those are the people that are going to help shape the next norm, the new norm. And like your post-pandemic playbook is a perfect example of that. We have to think differently. I know we've been saying stuff like that for years, but I'm telling you, this is you need to really reevaluate everything that you do. And if you learn something, right, get on a social network and share it. We need each other, and that shared wisdom is what's going to create momentum. I'm going to write as many articles as I can on ZDNet, as long as they have me, because I'm learning and I'm meeting extraordinary people along the way. So networking is about giving. Networking is about giving. That's my final comment.
Hey, thanks a lot, Vala. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern live. And of course, catch us on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts as well. All right, take care. Thanks, everyone.
See you, everyone. Bye-bye.